You're listening to Business Stories with Ryan Arcaracci, where I speak to business professionals from all walks of life. Thanks for listening, and let's get to it. Hey everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for joining me for another episode. It's not every day you get a chance to talk to somebody who's inspired you musically, creatively. Me as a bass player, I'm excited to be talking to Mr. Greg Norton, formerly of Husker, now with a band called UltraBomb. Greg, thank you for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Let's go back a few years. How did you pick up the bass? How did you get inspired to play the bass? I just kind of want to understand your story with that instrument.
I guess as a kid, I still had fat fingers, right? So the guitar didn't really work for me. And plus I always loved bass line. So when I was 14, my mom, actually, no, I take that back. It must have been 13. My mom bought me my first bass for a birthday present, and
Yeah.
kind of, fooled around on it through high school and never really got serious with it until all of a sudden there was this band called Husker uh, and we had a gig, and it's like I had to learn three sets of material. Of course, that's the four-piece Husker that only played three shows of all cover material. But
Yeah.
that basically, turned into Bob Grant and myself writing, doing originals, being punks and having fun.
Yeah. And you and Grant, you guys worked at a record store together, right?
We did, yeah. We actually worked at a couple of stores together, owned by the same guy, but we met in a suburban strip mall store called Melody Lane, and then ultimately ended up at a shop called Cheapo Records, which was right on the McAllister College campus in St. Paul, and that's where we met Bob when he showed up late August of 78 to start his freshman year at McAllister.
Yeah. And I heard it was a funny story how Bob got involved with playing with you guys because it was around like Thanksgiving time. What's that? What is that story? How I think your mom or something invited him, or talk about that.
Right. Um, so there was the Ramones were did a tour in the fall of '78, opening up for Foreigner. It was an arena tour, and they were playing the St. Paul Civic Center. The three of us were going together. It was, I don't know, maybe a week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And my mom's just talking to Bob. She's like, "Oh, so are you going to go home for the holidays?" He's like, "Oh no, I'm probably going to stay here." And she's like, "Oh, well, what are you going to do?" He's like, "Oh, I'll probably just sit around by myself in my dorm room." And she's like, "No, you're going to come over here and have dinner with us." Uh, and actually, I had just recently met Bob, and I'm like, I just like met this guy.
Yeah.
Now
Right.
my mom just invited him to Thanksgiving dinner, so uh, I hope he's like not a weirdo or anything. So
Right.
he came over for Thanksgiving. We had a great time. It was maybe about 4 or 5 weeks later is when the manager of Cheapo Records, this guy named Charlie Pine, uh, Grant, myself, a couple other friends, and Charlie Pine were at this corner dive bar, and Charlie came back with a couple of pitchers of beer from the bar and said, "Grant, we need to put a band together because I just got us a gig." And Grant's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, I saw they had music here, so I asked him about it." And the guy said, "Yeah, why? You got a band?" And he said, "Sure, I do." And he goes, "All right, you're playing March 30th and 31st."
So
That's
you got
how.
thrown into it, really.
Right, exactly. And that's, and then Grant's like, "Well, I know this guy at McAllister, he's got a flying V, he could probably play guitar."
Yeah.
And the next day, Grant and I picked Bob up, and the three of us jammed out a bunch of Ramones tunes, and we're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is fun. It's fun playing with the three of us." And we learned, like I said, three sets of cover songs that, I mean, ranged from Lou Reed to the Beatles to Dave Edmunds and Elvis Costello to Para Ubu to the Buzzcocks. I mean, it was all over the place, and some Ramones,
Yeah.
as well as like Gene Vincent and the Trash Band. Uh, and Bob Grant and myself really enjoyed playing together, but we
Yeah.
didn't necessarily like playing with Charlie. little bit older than us, had a little bit of a attitude that, like, he's a little bit too cool,
Yeah.
and so we're like, well, let's not tell Charlie, but let's. So we start rehearsing on our own, start writing our own material. We had one more show after those first two that Charlie lined up at McAllister College. And when we got done with our set, they were like, "Hey, you guys still have like 15 minutes to keep playing." So the three of us jumped up to start playing the music that we just wrote.
Yeah.
And Charlie had no idea what was going on, and somebody yanked the cord out of the back of the keyboards that he was playing, so that he couldn't, because he didn't know what was happening.
Right.
And the rest is history. That was the birth of Husker Du right there.
Wow. That's wild. And was it weird? I mean, what was the experience like with Charlie after that? I mean, did you guys pretty much just kind of, you know, break?
I see him around occasionally. He still lives in the Twin Cities. I mean, he went on to work with the Twin Cities band, the Jayhawks, and he's still involved in music. He is a good keyboard player. I think he was a little bitter at first, and but he probably didn't like the original stuff that we were playing. He was
Yeah.
um, we were probably too punk for him, but I see him around now, and we get along fine. We're cordial, so
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
good.
And then Husker Du really evolved to be like you guys were like hardcore. I mean, you were playing record songs, but they were hardcore. I mean, they were powerful, they were edgy, they were energetic. Um, and those early shows were super crazy. I remember I watched a video that said there was this group of guys that would go there and wrestle at your shows, and they were like
Oh yeah,
super
yeah.
fans. Can you talk a little bit about that? What that was
Oh
about?
sure, yeah. No, those we had this rabid group of fans that we ultimately ended dubbing the Husker Veggies.
Yeah.
How we came up with that, we're not really sure. But then we would jokingly say, "Oh yeah, it means very inebriated, generally intoxicated."
Okay.
And yeah, you know, the American Wrestling Association, that's Vern Gagne and the Crusher, and uh, actually, basically all the people that Vince McMahon ultimately steals for the WWE or whatever it is now.
Yeah.
Uh, came A lot of those guys came from here. Jesse the Body Ventura,
Yeah.
went on to become governor of the state of Minnesota.
Right.
But yeah, so there was a big love of punk rock. There was a big love of pro wrestling, and these guys like to kind of put on their moves out on the dance floor. It was pretty hilarious. It was all just a good time. You know,
How are you're trying to play during that? Is like was it interrupting your play? Was it distracting? Was it a problem for you?
no, not at all. Actually, it added to the whole ambiance and of the night, and the spirit of the energy of the crowd, and
Right.
we fed off each other. It was very symbiotic.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bob was a fan of wrestling, wasn't he? Wasn't he kind of into that
Oh
stuff
yeah.
too? Yeah.
Oh, Bob is still a huge wrestling fan. I mean, he after Husker, he even did a stint writing for an association, I think, based out of Atlanta, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, we did a tour with a guy named James Melby who had worked for the AWA, and so we, got a lot of inside secrets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was it, it's fun. It's entertainment. It's a morality play, right? Good conquers over evil, but the
Right.
bad guys occasionally will rise up. Oh, look out, he's got a chair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
It's so funny how punk rock and wrestling kind of go hand in hand for some reason. I've got a lot of friends who love punk rock, and then a lot of those same friends are huge into wrestling. It's funny how there's a synergy
Yeah, it
there.
is. Yep.
Uh,
Hmm.
well, that's great, Greg. So let's talk about UltraBomb. So I mean, you had a lot of bands since Husker Du. That's been a while. It's been like 3, 4 decades, right? So you've done some other things before
Yeah, I
UltraBomb.
have. I briefly had a band right after Husker Du called Gray Area,
Yeah,
and we did a one tour down to Texas and back. But it was like in the middle of the summertime, so kids weren't in college. just poor timing on our part.
Yeah.
When we did record some tracks at Pachyderm Studios, where Nirvana recorded with Steve Albini.
Wow.
That's like about 20 miles from where I live in Cannon Falls. So I'm in
Really?
Red Wing, Minnesota. And after that tour, things kind of fizzled out. Our guitar player decided he didn't want to be a guitar player anymore. And of course, the drummer and I were like, well, it's kind of hard to be a rock band without a guitar player.
Right.
So from there, I drift into working uh, in restaurants. I meet a dear friend, Lenny Russo, who's one of the top chefs in the upper Midwest. But at the time, he was, uh, we're talking 1988,
Yeah.
1989 is when we meet, and he talks me into the back of the house and teaches me how to cook.
Yeah.
And from there, that led into a very long career in restaurants, and ultimately, I ended up, being a chef and doing all this farm to table cooking from scratch, writing your own menus, changing them, daily if not weekly, and and it was great. I absolutely loved that. But during that period, I didn't pick up the bass. I had, I was working long hours in the restaurant.
Yeah.
So I went like literally, I think at least 14 years without even touching a bass.
Wow.
And then I met this guy from the Twin Cities who was the drummer in a world-renowned jazz trio called the Bad Plus, and they were playing a show, and I read that they said Husker Du was an influence on him. I'm like, wow, that's really cool, and I really like these guys.
Yeah.
Went to see a show, and after the show, I wanted to just introduce myself. And Dave King immediately was like, "Oh man, I've got an idea for a band, and you're like the perfect bass player for it."
Yeah.
And I'm like thinking like, "Oh shit, I should probably make sure I have a bass." And I didn't
Yeah.
have any amps at the time. I'm like, I should probably buy an amp too.
Right.
Uh, so that's how the next project I did then is this thing with Dave and um, a couple other guys, Eric Frotsky and Craig Taborn, for the first record that was called Gang Font featuring Interloper.
Hmm.
Um, and Thirsty Ear Records out of New York put it out. They're kind of an avant jazz label, but they dabble in some rock. But the record kind of, it was too out the for the rock guys, and it was too rock for the jazz guys. So
Yeah.
they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But Gang Font still managed to, play some shows. We played a few shows around New York. We actually recorded a second record in 2010, which we have not released yet. I joke that it's our Grand Reserva. We've just been cellaring it until it's ready,
Hmm.
but hopefully we'll get that out this year. And Gang Font will actually probably play a show or two in the next year as well. But Gang Font was the type of thing where we were playing like one gig a year, and
Yeah.
so I had gotten a phone call from somebody that I knew from a band called Porcupine, and they'd been around for a while. And I saw them open up for the Meat Puppets. I liked their stuff. I thought Casey was I still think Casey's a great singer and guitar player.
Right.
And so I stepped in, replaced their longtime bass player, and and Porcupine as a three-piece with Ian Prince on drums. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was Ian is just an incredible drummer. Casey writes really good tunes. Um, it started out really great, and then it just kind of and ends up stagnating a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, Ends up not working out. So I leave Porcupine. Finney McConnell, who is a Facebook friend at the time, sees this and sends me a message and goes, "Hey, we should start a band." And I'm
Hmm.
like, "Well, what are you thinking?" He's like, "Oh, I know the greatest punk drummer in the world, Jamie Oliver. He's drums for the UK Subs. Good friend of mine. Known him for a long time. He'd love to be in a band." And at the same time he sent me that message, he messaged Jamie going like, "Hey, you want to start a band with Greg Norton?" And Jamie's like, "Fuck yeah, I'm in." So
Yeah.
that's basically how um, UltraBomb starts. We don't have a name yet, but come up with the name UltraBomb like pretty quick.
Hmm.
The original concept of Finney's was, well, the three of us, we're all from iconic, punk bands backgrounds. We'll just get together. We'll play just a bunch of Husker and Mahones and UK sub covers and just have a laugh.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, well that sounds like a lot of fun. Let's do that. And then it's like, well, we should probably also maybe start working on our own material too.
Right.
And so now this is like literally a month after we become the concept online. And Finney's uh, is in Germany doing a solo tour, and he messages and says, "Hey, I've got like studio time booked in Berlin, and Jamie is just going to happen to be in Berlin at the same time."
Yeah.
And I just started thinking, like, oh man, they're both going to be in the studio. Finney's got studio or in Berlin. Finney has studio time booked. I should probably maybe go over there and actually
Yeah.
meet these guys, and so I one that crazy notion turned into taking a flyer literally to Berlin. Um, Jamie picked me up from the airport. We take the train back into Berlin. First time I'd ever met him
Yeah.
uh, face to face. And the next morning, Finney shows up at the studio. First time I had ever actually met him face to face. And here's the three of us in the room for the first time.
Yeah.
First time UltraBombs all together. And everybody's getting along great. And so Finney's like, oh man, I wrote a ton of great riffs for UltraBomb. And we start going through stuff, and we would hammer out an arrangement and get it all set. And then we tell the engineer to record it
Yeah.
and record, and probably kept most of the first takes. Some stuff was, like second take. And the engineer was like, so you're telling me that you just wrote that song just right now? And we're like, yeah,
Yeah.
we actually have never met before. This is like the first time we've all been together. Yeah, all of this music we're writing right now, right in front of you. And we did 4 songs the first day, another 6 on the second day. So
Wow.
we've got 10 songs. And we're like really happy with the music. We're going, wow, man, this turned out great.
Yeah.
There were a couple of riffs that we worked on. We're like, okay, that one's not working. Let's just scrap that. Uh, the third night, Jamie is off playing a gig, uh, filling in for a local German band on drums, and Finney is laying down some rhythm guitar tracks, and I'm like, I've got all these lyrics that I've been writing for the last couple of years, and
Right.
so we print them off my phone, and Finney looks at it and he's like, "Holy shit, I've got the whole record figured out."
Wow.
And so on the last day, Jamie's back. Finney goes in, sings the whole record straight through.
Wow.
We did some pencil edits on the fly just to kind of help with cadence and to make things flow. And he nails it. It's like, holy shit, I can't believe how well you put my lyrics to our music.
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of times the lyrics weren't necessarily written with any particular tune in mind. I mean, usually, maybe there was something in the background, but
Yeah.
it just fits so well. And
Wow.
and but he's like, "Oh, we made a masterpiece," and we're all like, "Yeah, we did it."
Yeah.
4 days in the studio, we just made a 10-song record. And at the end of that day, we still had some time, and we had talked about doing a cover song a couple nights earlier, and we said like, "Oh, Sonic Reducer would be a great song to do." So we had enough time. We go in, lay down Sonic Reducer, and then I sang it in one take, and that's the record.
That is wild. So do you think, I mean, it seems like it happens so easily for you guys because of the experience, the experience you collectively have, right? Do you think that's a part of it? Or do you think it was just the chemistry was there?
I think it's a combination of both, and probably more chemistry than than history. Our
Yeah.
backgrounds, but I mean, it didn't hurt that we all were, you know, already players and had played in a lot of bands and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But um, it was by far chemistry, and it still is. It felt like we had been playing together for years when we recorded in Berlin, and like I said, Hansi, the engineer at the studio, was like, I can't believe that you guys just did that. He
Wow.
was totally blown away.
Yeah.
So real quick start to the band,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, let's go. And then it takes um, a few months to get it mixed and mastered. It's because
Right.
we're all back now in our separate countries, and trying to navigate time zones and communicate and get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we we've got some shows booked that we end up, we had a run of shows in Canada booked that, and we end up having to cancel because there's Jamie books his flight, is told he doesn't need a visa, shows up at the airport, and they're like, oh, we changed our mind, you need a visa.
Oh.
He's like, so that cancels that. And then um, we were gonna had some shows in Ireland and England planned for the spring of 2022, and that ends up getting canceled because of COVID restrictions being put back in place.
Right.
So now we've got things rescheduled for uh, June of 2022, and I get diagnosed with prostate cancer. I'm like,
Right.
you have to be kidding me. So uh, get my surgery scheduled. In the meantime, we do get one offer from a Minneapolis venue called the Hook and Ladder.
Yeah.
They want us to headline their Roots Rock and Deep Blues Festival that they put on every year,
Hmm.
and we're like, yeah, let's do this. So Jamie and Finney fly in for that. We play one show. It was good, sloppy fun.
Yeah.
Uh, the crowd went wild, and 5 days later, I'm in the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, having my prostate out.
Wow.
And we canceled the rest of our plans for 2022 so I could fully recuperate.
Right.
And all this time, we're also waiting for our vinyl to get pressed. It gets ordered, but we're like a small, we're a small order. We keep getting bumped by stuff, and it all the Adele released an album. Taylor Swift releases two. Beyonce put out an album. So
Right.
all those small orders get pushed aside so that they can press 3 to 5 million copies of a record that probably will only sell 1 million, right?
Right.
So um, that gets us to right now. Jamie is here in Red Wing with me. Finney comes in Sunday. We start full band rehearsals. Our first show of this tour is Thursday in St. Paul at the
Hmm.
Turf Club.
Yeah.
And then we've got 18 shows between Thursday and the end of the month. And ultimately it gets us to Punk Rock Bowling for Memorial Day weekend. We're doing two shows, one with the Dickies on Sunday night.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for that because I'm a big Dickies fan. I think it was Bob that once said, like, oh well, when we first got together, Husker wanted to play faster than the Ramones, and then we heard the Dickies, and now we want to play faster than the Dickies.
Yeah.
So
Right.
saw them a bunch of times back in the day, and really looking forward to seeing them again. And then Monday we're on the main stage, and I think we're the fourth to last band. So after us, L7, Suicidal Tendencies, and then the headliner, Dropkick Murphys. So I think it's a good time slot. I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's punk rock bowling, baby, on the
Yeah.
main stage, Vegas.
Yeah. Have you ever played Vegas before?
Uh, we Husker Du played once at the university,
Okay.
and that's the only time that we played.
Okay. Well, I think this will be a different experience. Punk rock bowling is fun. It's a lot of fun. It's
I hope
exciting.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I hear you're also kind of a foodie, right, Greg? Like you were a cook for a while. Are you kind of would you consider yourself a little bit of a food snob, or what's your taste when it comes to food?
Well, I'm not a food snob.
Yeah.
I know how to lower my expectations, so as to not be disappointed when I go out to eat.
Yeah.
Typically, I am disappointed though when I go out to eat at a high end restaurant that has a really great reputation.
Yeah.
Then I get a little bit more critical. But
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was a chef for a long time, and the guy that taught me, how to cook. I mean, he's a perennial James Beard nominee for top chef in the Midwest.
Hmm.
Usually, always losing out to either somebody in Chicago or Kansas City. But
Yeah.
what do you do? But yeah, I mean, he taught me a lot about food all through that time. Also, I learned a lot about wine. When I had my own restaurant, I was the wine buyer. And actually, when I got out of the restaurant business in 2010, I went into wine sales for one of the distributors in Minnesota that specializes in, direct importing small producers from Europe and South America, as well as some California uh, wineries as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
I'm probably more of a snob when it comes to wine than I am um, food. But there again, I don't mean that like it has to be expensive. It just has to be good. There are so many great winemakers out there that are putting out bottles of wine that are only going to cost you maybe 15-20 bucks for a great bottle of wine. uh, it drives me crazy in America. You've got everybody loves their craft independent breweries,
Yeah.
uh, you know piss on the big guys, and then
Yeah.
when it comes to wine, all they drink is like the mass produced shit. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, you don't have to drink apothic. You can drink something way better than that. You
Yeah.
know, that's something created in a lab. Have something that was created in the goddamn vineyard.
Right.
So,
Something
yeah,
real. Yeah.
yeah,
So Husker Du, you said earlier today, Husker Du's got a record store day release. Talk a little bit about that.
yeah. So it's funny how you were talking about the early recordings and how kind of hectic and fast they were. So this is a record from three different sets from the Longhorn Bar in Minneapolis, which was
Mhm.
long that was the original long punk venue in Minneapolis, and it was a great room. The Stranglers played there, Blondie played there, Talking Heads played there, Perubu played there, Elvis
Wow.
Costello played there, the Police even played there. Um, it was a great room, and so it's our first set from 1979, and it's interesting because the band has only been together for a few months at this point,
Right.
but we're writing our own material. Uh, it's not as fast as it gets, and then you skip forward to side two, and it's almost exactly a year later. The band picks up a little bit in speed, but this is also the time where we were still pretty heavily influenced by um, what was coming out of like the Manchester scene in England, and
Yeah.
we loved the Buzzcocks, and uh, Bob is really starting to kind of come into his own as a songwriter, and the very last, the second disc then is the last show that we played there. We were up against the Plasmatics across town at a different bar, so we knew that we probably weren't going to have a lot of people at our show, but
Yeah.
we had a lot of fun that night. And the recordings sound so and so clean and good, and the band is tight and powerful. Uh, it's I think it holds up with like anything that would have come out like in 1980, But
Right.
this is before Bob discovers Black Flag and goes like hardcore.
Yeah.
We can do hardcore.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's called Husker Du Tonight Longhorn. It was a record. It's a record store day um, exclusive for through July 22nd. So right now it's only available at stores that participate in Record Store Day, and then after that, we put it out on our own Reflex label, which is the label that we created to put our first single out on.
Right.
So we're the label, and we'll have it available for broader distribution later this summer.
Is it going to be released as a vinyl then, and then with like a box set with a booklet and everything? Is there going to be a whole package with it, or?
It's a double LP vinyl,
Okay.
and we did have some CDs pressed up, and we thought we, you know, made pressed up enough to get us through the end of the year, but they ended up taking orders for um, 3 times the amount of the CDs that we made. So it'll be out there on both vinyl and CD.
That's great. Is it
Nice gatefold sleeve, photos of the band from the Longhorn days. Uh, Thurston Thurston Moore did the liner notes.
wow,
Yep.
that's great. Is it going to be can you purchase it online or is it just for in store only?
I'm not sure if it's available online. Maybe through a record shop that has an online presence, but um, I'm not really sure how that works with the
Okay.
how their exclusive works. Except that if you've got a local shop that did something for Record Store Day, they most likely would maybe still have it in stock.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So with UltraBomb, like where are you driving your inspiration from lyrically? Because you said you wrote a lot of lyrics. Like, are you talking about mostly just stuff going on in the world now, or where does your inspiration come for that?
A lot of it, is inspired by things that are happening around us, and some of them are from personal experiences, and some of them are just you know observations on how this shit world that we're living in right now, and
Right.
how to hopefully hopefully we inspire people to be better and make it a better place. So yeah, the lyrics kind of spanned 2 or 3 year period where I just would jot down some things. Some songs were fully realized in the moment, and I would crank out a whole song. And a lot of them were, I'd write, think of something and write it down, and then later on jot something else down, and then a couple of weeks later something else, and then going through stuff, it's like, oh, actually these parts actually all fit together,
Right.
and I'm still Finney probably only used a little over half of what I actually presented that day, and I didn't, print off everything. So I've got more lyrics. I've been writing more lyrics, and our goal with the band, I wouldn't be surprised if we crank out a few new tunes here even um, before we start the tour,
Hmm.
and hopefully we'll be debuting some new material on the road. And the goal is to have another album's worth of stuff ready to get into the studio with by this fall.
Yeah.
uh, we're working with DC Jam Records, and they're ready to um, put out the next record as quick as we're ready to give it to them. So
Yeah. How do you prepare? It seems like you're the kind of guy that can play the bass and just kind of just start working. Like you can just start flowing, you know, anytime. Even if if you stop playing bass, like you said, for 10 years, I feel like you're the kind of guy who could pick it up and just start playing again. No problem. Like you don't have that slump, right? Typically.
right, and I think part of that is just due to that. I'm not a trained like a, it's like I didn't learn how to play the bass um, like from a music teacher. It's like I basically had to learn to play
Right.
as we were playing. And so, for me, I just kind of jump in and I play what I hear I think the bass should be doing.
Right.
And I guess that kind of became, I guess I developed a style that people go like, oh yeah, it's like I recognize those bass lines. It's I like the sound. So
Yeah.
um, and actually, yeah, and the gang font was a great way to get back into it because it was kind of a more free project to begin with, and Dave King just wanted me to play whatever I wanted to, so it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. You kind of, I mean, I feel like with me, like you just kind of play and you feel the energy of the music, right? And it just kind of comes through you. Is that kind of what you think, kind of how it feels for you?
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, feeding off the other band members and what they're doing.
Right.
You know, and working out bits that sound good together.
Yeah. And you guys have a pretty big tour coming up over the next several weeks. I mean, leading up to Punk Rock Bowling, how do you deal with that amount of work? Just the traveling and all that stuff. I mean, do you do anything to kind of keep yourself together, healthy during tour? Because it can be grueling sometimes, right?
It's definitely can be a grind.
Yeah.
It's going to go by fast. You know, we start Thursday night and actually play three nights in a row, and then we have a day off. It just happened to work out that way.
Yeah.
But then it starts 8 shows and a day off because we have to drive from Dallas to Tucson,
Hmm.
and then 6 shows right up through Memorial Day.
Yeah.
And we do have a day off after Punk Rock Bowling,
Yeah.
and one last show in Denver, and then home. So it'll go fast, and the way you cope with playing the shows actually does help you relax and
Yeah.
keeps you focused and sharp.
Right.
Um, and with a schedule like that, it's not like you have time to you know go out and um, it's nobody's going to be drinking their face off type of thing. So
Right. Right. Well, Greg, it's been a good conversation. I think everybody listening should go check out UltraBomb. I was listening to Time to Burn yesterday and I loved it. It's really it's got a mix of that old sound, but there's some new elements to it, which I love.
oh, for sure. Yep.
So
It's
yeah,
uh, classic, but fresh at the same time.
right. And that's what I think we all want to hear now. So
Nice.
that's awesome. So well, yeah, and if you're going to be at a record store day or going, if you're listening, go pick up the Husker Du box set. I'm going to go check that out for sure. I hope there's a
Not a
record.
box, just a double LP.
Oh, it's a double LP. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll have to go check that out if it's going to be at one store here. We have a couple of stores here in Vegas. So that's great. Well,
Yeah.
Greg, thank you so much, man. It's been a great conversation. As always, you're an inspiration for me as a bass player and me and tons of other people. I remember, gosh, 20 some years ago, my uncle who's a drummer in New York, you've got to check out Husker Du. His band is extremely influential. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, Greg, and I really wish you the best with your tour and everything. I know you'll be successful. So thanks again, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Did you enjoy this episode? I hope so. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Ryan Says Thanks. Your support is appreciated. And hey, even if you don't buy me a coffee, I'm happy to have you listening. So keep it up, and thanks again.